I'm always really grateful to be able to give reflections in the readings. So when David asked if I could do today, my first response was, yes, sure. And then I saw the readings. How do you preach on the Our Father? What can you say about the Lord's Prayer that hasn't already been said much better tons of times before? So here's my small attempt to add something probably that's already been said. This is the perfect time to be praying the Our Father. Lent is a perfect time to be praying with this prayer that Jesus taught us. Our catechumens, those who have not yet been baptized, one of the possible prayer services for the rite of Christian initiation for adults is to present them the Our Father just before they're baptized in the last weeks of Lent. In some ways, the giving the catechumens, giving those to be baptized, this precious, precious gift of the Lord to us, fits really well with Lent. If in Lent we're preparing to renew our baptismal promises, if in Lent we are joining them in a period of being able to say, I believe, to what we learn about who God is and what God does and loves us for, then praying the Our Father and remembering our status as children, as adopted daughters and sons of God, is perhaps a great way to begin Lent. I often say that in English we have a harder time praying the Our Father for two reasons. One is that, and both of those reasons sort of make us kind of skip past the first part of the prayer, right? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, there's a few things going on there that might make this prayer harder for us. One is the thee and thy and art. That's older, archaic language. The irony is that thy and thee, the reason we use those words in English is that when they were first used to translate these prayers into English, those were the more familiar form. If you've studied other languages or if another language is your first language, that thee and thy were the tu and toi of English. They were the more familiar form. We're supposed to call God by a familiar name, the tu form, not the more formal usted or the more formal vous in French. And now it's kind of flipped, so we use thee and thy language for God when we're supposed to be using you and your language for God. God's supposed to be someone approachable. God's supposed to be a parent who's intimately connected with us. The second thing that makes it difficult is the sing-song part of the beginning, right? Thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. So I always tell people when I'm trying to pray the Our Father, just keep going and ignore the comma there. So you start saying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Get rid of that sing-songiness that makes us sort of bounce right past the theology, perhaps. And the third big question is, well, what does all this mean? And this is again where we, for whom English is a first language, have more trouble than our friends who speak Spanish or French or other languages. And it has to do with this horrible, wonderful thing called the subjunctive that some of you probably had to study when you were doing high school Spanish or high school French to try to understand why do you use a different verb form, technically a mood, than the indicative. And so we remember learning about all these cases in which you use the subjunctive, when something might be, when something is to be the case but has not yet happened, right? It's clearer in Spanish of Padre nuestro que estás en los cielos, santificado sea tu nombre, venga a nosotros tu reino. The sense of more to happen that we forget in English because we don't use let it be so or may thy kingdom come all that often. The language sounds weird. And yet here it is. This prayer is about expectation of something that hasn't yet happened. Hallowed be your name. May your name be hallowed. May your name be holy again. May your kingdom come to us. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. All of this is about expectation of God's action for us. That there's something more to happen. That the Christian story doesn't end with Jesus' death and resurrection, but instead that's the beginning of the drama, the beginning of the story. And we're part of that. So the second half of the prayer where we ask God to give us what we need to get through the day, where we pledge our forgiveness of others so as to receive our own forgiveness, to be delivered from evil, to be saved from temptation or from the time of trial. All of that comes from our role of receiving from God what God's going to do to finish bringing about the reign of God. The forward-looking prayer, which is great for Lent and great right now for this first week of Lent. So after the frenzy or the flurry of thinking of Lent as all the things that you're going to do, that I'm going to do, I'm going to give up this, I'm going to pray this many times, I'm going to change this routine, all that's important. But praying the Our Father reminds us each time we pray it about the centeredness of God in our Lenten practices and not us. It decenters us. We are receiving and God is doing. God's kingdom is coming and we're welcoming it. God is forgiving our trespasses. God is giving us our daily bread. God is the one who is making his will done on earth as it is in heaven. So if you started off Lent with a bit of a Washington, D.C. kind of type A, we're going to make Lent a project and I'm going to totally not do that thing this year and fall apart in week 2, praying the Our Father is a chance perhaps to go back to being a child of a God who is mother and father to us, who wants to give us good things, who wants us to receive God's love, who wants to forgive and heal us. The theologian and spiritual writer Esther de Waal talks about Lent as a time for a gradual healing of the woundedness of sin. This is a chance for us to be comforted by God, perhaps, especially after the year we've had, to, in this Lent, be ready to say again at Easter, I believe in God, the Father who loves us. I believe in God, the Mother who cares for us and would never forget us. And praying the Our Father every day, or 3 times a day, as they recommended in the early church, might be a way of getting back in touch of who we are, not just as people who try hard, not just as sinners as we are, but as children, to rediscover a God who is Father and Mother to us.